So this is DocuWare. It's a browser-based application. Thanks, Nicole. There we go. So that means that it is accessible from really anywhere that you can access the internet. We have an on-premise version, but DocuWare is what we call ourselves a cloud-first organization, which means that we really, primarily drive new features to the cloud first, and then they later come to the on-premise. If you do feel like you have a statutory requirement that you need an on-premise installation, we could certainly talk about that. But again, I'd say probably 90% of our new business is in the cloud at this point for the reasons that we just discussed. But this is DocuWare. So I'll quickly kind of go through and describe some of the features and how all the pieces fit together. And that way, when we get into the specific processes, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. If we look at the screen here, on the right side of the screen, we have the DocuWare viewer. If I double-click on this document, it brings it up in the viewer. All of our DocuWare viewer can view hundreds of file formats natively, so not just scanned documents, but really any kind of an Office format or most just document formats generically, like even things like, like AutoCAD files, can be viewed natively in the browser, regardless of whether you have those programs installed on your computer or even inside of your network. We have a proprietary rendering format, so we can render all of those file formats natively and fairly accurately. Inside of the viewer, we have kind of general annotation tools. So, if I want to hide some information, I can draw a box over content, and I can save that and make that a permanent redaction, or I can just make that as a layer that sits on top. Inside of so that's the kind of the DocuWare viewer. On the left side of the screen, we have all of the navigation. We have document trays. We have our permanent archive, lists, tasks, and folders, and then the electronic forms that this user is assigned. I'll obviously go through each of those more slowly. If I were to take this PDF from Windows, I can drag it into the document tray. The document tray is kind of like the inbox on your desk. It's unstructured storage. It is, first in, first out, and it's the place where you go to process some of these records. Similarly to the paper documents that would be put on your desk, I could take this PDF and I can, let me get a second document. Take this other document. I could take these two PDFs and I can staple them together to make a new PDF. I can rearrange the pages. I can take a Word and an Excel document, and I'm really just getting it ready to store into the permanent archive. And for DocuWare, we call the permanent archive a filing cabinet. And just like the paper filing cabinets you have in your office, or if you looked at the, if you think about Windows folders on a server somewhere, we're going to want to describe those documents so that you can find them later. But rather than a hierarchy like you'd get in a paper cabinet or on the server, DocuWare takes that idea and we flatten it. So every document is fully described. If I take this bill and I store it in the assessor's documents, each document is fully described with metadata that describes it specifically. So this is an assessor or a property tax bill. It's got a parcel number. It's got a document type of tax bill. Read the information off of the bottom here. It's got a status, a bill number, and amount. So we can find this document by any of these values, so it's easy for us to locate in the future. In this case, you'll notice that a lot of these values are pre-filled out. And the reason that it did that is because DocuWare utilizes machine learning so that we can find the values on the document without having to build a template for each one of your records. This is just one example of how we can fully describe the document without having to manually type a bunch of stuff in, but we certainly can type stuff in if we need to. So if you wanted to make this a different document type, for instance, we could make this a drop-down list, and this drop-down list could be defined inside the application, or it could come from a database. We also have the ability, and this is also the way that we train the document, to read the information directly from the record. So you'll notice that the document date is here, and that's a date format. If I just click on July the 1st, 2020, when I let go, it converts that into a date format that's now going to be searchable and rangeable so that I can see that. And then the next time I were to store a document that looks something similar to this, DocuWare would understand that that's probably the date that I'm interested in, so that it would pre-fill this out. There's a color coding system here, so you'll notice that each of these fields is kind of yellow. So it's pretty sure it knows what I want about these documents, but it hasn't seen it enough times to really learn. Usually DocuWare can learn a record within seeing it 2 to 3 times, and then it'll fill that in and turn all these fields green. Now when I store it into the filing cabinet, I can now find it based on any of those values. So if I were to search by the assessor's documents, I could say, show me everything for parcel number this, and it'll show me all of those documents. And so I can see this kind of table view, and so I can easily say, well, I only want to see, a change in ownership statement. And so now it'll only show me that specific document. So we can really get very granular and find the exact document that you're looking for very easily. But there's a lot of times where we still need to know what the paper record is. And so what DocuWare allows us to do is kind of merge the paper world with the electronic world in a lot of different ways. So if I were to find this document, say I was somebody inside the organization that needed to see this document, I could bring up this record and say, yes, I'm interested in this specific record. It's on shelf number 100 in box number 11. I as a user maybe don't have access to go into the archives, but I can then say, this is the specific record that I'm interested in. And rather than having to fill out a second request, I can just use an electronic stamp and say, request this document. And this would change the status of that record to say that it's been requested, and then that'll automatically trigger an alert for somebody in the records department to say, hey, there's a new document request. So now they can specifically see that it's been requested. They could go down to the archives and they could pull that out. And then all I need to do is say, okay, now I'm going to check this out to Alex, who's the person that requested it. And now it's in the list of checked out documents, and that, if somebody needs to see that paper record, we know who had it last. So that information will stay with the record forever. If I were to go and open up the history of the document, I can see all the times that the values were changed, who changed them, what those new values were. And so I can really recreate the life cycle of the document from the time it was stored and all the indexes were created all the way to the time that it was even deleted or removed through our retention period. Additionally, these document dates and the classifications and the categories can also be used to drive retention periods. So maybe a change in ownership status has a retention period of 7 years. We can automatically calculate the deletion date based on the document date, and then either automatically delete that or notify you of all the documents that need to be deleted in the system based on the rules that are used to drive the retention period. When we're ready to check that document back in, we might want to say, well, what are all the other documents that are in box number 11? So if we were to go search, instead of searching by a specific record, I could say, show me everything in box number 11. And then this should be an inventory of all the documents that exist. You can see this one's still checked out, but I could check that back in. I also have the ability to export this as an Excel document. So if I looked at this record, this is basically an inventory of all the documents that exist inside of that system, including, the parcel number, the document type, and the status. And so I could now print that. I could print that and put it in the paper record. So now you also have an inventory of all the documents that exist inside of that folder structure. So that's a really kind of a neat feature and something that we see a lot in state and local government. We also have the ability to kind of automate that check-in and check-out process more using, barcode cover pages and scanners and things like that. But, from a high level, the idea is that we're basically just changing the status of the document so that they match a specific pattern, and then that alerts the people inside the records department that they need to retrieve these documents. Okay. So let's talk about other ways of getting documents into the system. So if I were to open up my email, a lot of times the documents that we're talking about are not necessarily going to be paper records, but are, correspondence or other things that relate to other activities that are happening inside of the city or in the county or the state. So if I were to open up this email, you can see that this is an email, we'll say, from a vendor, and it says, thanks for awarding us a service related to a scanning project. The project number is 12345. Maybe that's an RFP number. There's pieces of information that we would utilize to search for this record later. So, we know this email address. Maybe we can look up the company that this person works for. We're going to want to keep track of this attachment as well as the email itself. So DocuWare has a native integration into Outlook. So if you click, you can see I have this tab up here that says DocuWare. I can both store emails into an archive, and I can also search DocuWare for other things that are related. So if I wanted to say, show me everything from DocuWare demo 2020 at gmail.com, I could find all those records by a simple button click. In this case, I'm just going to store the document, and I want to store both the email and the attachment. If I were to right-click on the attachment, I could choose to just store the attachment if I didn't care about the email itself. And we also have other ways of archiving emails, including monitoring folders, monitoring complete addresses, and archiving everything. And then you can also just drag and drop to an Outlook folder and archive that way. But I'm gonna store the whole document, and I'm gonna use the projects document because this is related to project number 12345. When I store this document, it's gonna bring me up another way of indexing this record. You can see that a lot of this stuff again is already filled out. So we know it's correspondence because that's how it's an email. So we want to store it as a correspondence. The company name is going to be DocuWare, and it's going to store this in a way that we can find the the effective date. We can find who the contact is, and then I'm just going to enter project 12345. When I store this record, I'll get a notification that it's been stored in DocuWare down here, and you'll also notice that the email is flagged here so that if I'm just looking at Outlook, I can see all the documents that were archived inside the application. Now, if I were to go look for that document, I can search for that record, and you can see here it is. So you'll notice that it is still an email object. I have the opportunity to convert that to a PDF if you want to make it a snapshot, but I can leave it as an email, and you can see that this is more flexible. I can also then see the attachments that were attached to it. And this is the scope of work that was attached. We also have the ability to only store the attachments or only the email, as I said. And then we can actually store them as separate files at the same time if that's what your workflow dictates. And so, we could say the time has gone by, and maybe one of the other respondents to this RFP was unhappy that DocuWare was awarded the scanning project. And so one of the things that we often see is the ability to interact with the public using DocuWare. So we offer a very functional forms product that is both publicly available and also not volume limited. So we offer a public forms option that doesn't limit the number of times people can submit forms. It's basically unlimited form submission for the public. And this is also mobile responsive. So if I click on, I have the form open here. I can open it by accessing the user's forms that were assigned. Or I can access it, I just have the tab open. You'll notice that it's going to assign me a unique records request so we can track all of these documents internally. It's automatically going to designate today's date, and then I've pre-filled out some of this information. I've also got it to where I can show it to you on my phone. And so you can see, shoot, there it is. I also have it set up on a screen share on my phone, so you can see that this same form is mobile responsive. So you can see that I didn't really have to do anything to make this a phone form, but it assigned it a different request number, it recognized the date, and it gives me an opportunity to enter all of this information. Again, we also have a mobile app, and that app can also be used for scanning, and so not just for retrieving documents, but you can participate in workflows, you can approve documents, you can scan and store additional information. So now when I store this public records request, it's going to store it into the filing cabinet. But in addition, it also is going to match a pattern that's going to, similar to the request from an employee for information that's in the archives. Now it's going to be a request for information from the general public. These requests also have specific time limits on them and requirements for how quickly we respond to them. So DocuWare, in addition to just giving you a list of things that are, it's nice that you see that these are happening and it allows you to keep an eye on them, DocuWare can put specific timeframes on your responses and send reminder notifications, can reassign to other users if you're out of the office, can notify management if there's a delay in processing a specific request. So if I submit this form, it'll take this information and publish it into a DocuWare filing cabinet. And then it'll, assign me a new number, and give me a new blank form. You'll notice now that I also have a task. So the difference here is that a list is kind of like stuff that we're keeping an eye on. These are the documents that are checked out. I might want to follow up on those later. A task means it's my turn to do something. I was given a task to do right now. If I look at this form that was submitted, I can say, oh, this person's asking for all the documents related to scanning project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can quickly see that if I were to go search for the cabinet, I could say, show me everything related to project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it found that document automatically. So from here, I could, download it. I could send an email. I could send it as an email to somebody outside of my organization. If I forward this email, I could send it. It'll open up Outlook and attach it to a new blank email for me. Somewhere. Too many monitors. Sorry. Yeah, there it is. But the idea here is that it allows you to easily collect that, and then I am being timed from when this happens. So from here, I can research this and reset the clock or send a notification out to the organization. And then I, as the administrator of this process, also received an email notification as soon as that form was submitted that says, new public request. Please review the details of the new request and gather the required documents. It also includes a link to that specific task. So if I click on that task, it gives me just the task. So it's not all of DocuWare. I don't have to find that. It just shows me the information that I need. And so in this way, I could just close this task out and say that it's completed, and we could notify the person that their information has been fulfilled, and then we could also make some of those documents available to them. And now when that task is complete, I can just close this tab, and I'm back in DocuWare. And you can see that the task is completed inside of the workflow, and I could also then search for that process later. So if I were to go search for the FOIA request filing cabinet, I can see all of the documents that came in and what their request number was in case somebody wanted to follow up on that. And then I could see that I completed it at this date and time. And we can also put additional metadata in there. So if you wanted to put notes in with the stamp, those things are available, and then that will live on the documents. But there's really a lot of other ways that we didn't really have time to get into in a simple demonstration.